Good morning, everyone, and very much welcome to the third day of Amsterdam FinTech Week. On Wednesday, June the 9th, we're going to talk to you about the European FinTech perspective. Over the past days, Monday, we talked about the consumer perspective of FinTech. Tuesday, we talked about the SME or the entrepreneur perspective of FinTech. And today, we really want to take you through a tour across everything that Europe has to offer. Because, funnily enough, even though Europe is becoming one increasingly, at the same time, we see that there's also much difference still between countries, culturally, how they deal with finances, but also still with regard to legislation. But of course, we'll see that there's some big plans on changing that. And I'm very happy also that we have someone from the European Committee there to talk about this. So what do we want to do today is really focus on getting the story out about where we can learn from each other across borders. How can we collaborate across borders, and how can we look into actually creating this one single market for FinTech that I think everyone really would like to have, because that helps you to scale your solutions and support a much wider audience with the solutions that you've made. Today, I'm of course also not alone. Today, as my co-host is Harry Vollaert from Rabo Frontier Ventures. Harry, good morning.
Good morning, Don. Looking forward today, see what's going on.
No, exactly. It's great to have you on board here. Besides Rabo Frontier Ventures, the venture arm of Rabobank, for the people who are not familiar with you just yet, you invest in FinTech, but also in agri-tech, right? I think that's a really interesting combination. How do you see that area evolve, both of them?
Well, we actually kicked off 4 years back. It's a 200 million fund. We are an early stage investor in FinTech as agri-tech companies, as what you just said. We actually invested a couple Dutch FinTech companies. And we are related to Rabobank. Rabobank is, of course, big in the food and agri globally. So it also makes sense to make strategic positions in agri-tech companies. And there is actually an interesting crossover between FinTech and agri-tech, especially when you look in emerging markets, how to facilitate working capital, for instance, to smaller farmers. Then you see FinTech and agri-tech come very close together. So I think there's an interesting crossover between these two.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think actually we talked about this also on Monday when we actually highlighted also that very often farmers are sort of working poor, right? So it's actually it's can be quite a harsh living as in the agri business, and that actually also FinTech could potentially help there to create better access to finance and help people improve their business models to actually sustain a better life.
Yeah, there's actually a good comparison with financial well-being. The first topic on Monday, and how to get in control of your farm, regardless if you have a big farm or a small farm. We call like farm management system, but it's actually pretty much the same thing as what we are seeing. Getting in control as an end consumer or a large corporate of your financial life. So we see the same trends there.
Yeah. Yeah, really interesting field, I think, and especially also, of course, fits well with some of the core competencies of the Netherlands from that perspective.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so I think you, as an investor, you already also look at the European perspective, right? So I think that's it's nice to have you also participate there. What do you expect of today?
Well, I think it's an excellent day today. You put a nice agenda together with your team, of course. Congratulations with that. And I think it gives a good overview of how actually the Netherlands is doing in comparison with all the other European countries. So we get a lot of different views from different people from other European countries, from Lithuania to Bulgaria to Germany. And so that gives you also a sense of how the Netherlands is doing, and that's actually stressed by the Foreign Investment Agency. So what is so special about the Netherlands? Is it really an important bridgehead for mainland Europe? How are we doing? And of course, right next after this panel, we have an investor panel. Together with Blackfin, Techstars, and of course Finch, the financial FinTech investor out of the Netherlands. I'm very looking forward to what their view is on the investor market, how the Netherlands is actually doing.
Yep. No, exactly. I think that's definitely an interesting perspective, and I know that you're also very much engaged there as a board member of Holland FinTech, and that's of course great to have you on board there as well, from the investment perspective as well as with this international view of what's going on in the world of fintech and agtech. I think it's a really extensive agenda, so I'm not going to read it out all, but indeed there's over 10 countries represented in the agenda today. So we're going to hear from all different sides of Europe on how things are moving forward. But maybe let's call out our first speaker of today, Prince Constantijn, who is leading techleap. techleap is the institution that actually supports scale-ups and startups in the Dutch market and helps them expand internationally. And so from that perspective, I think besides the international background that Constantijn has already, is very much looking after Europe as a one single market. Good morning, Constantijn.
Good morning. You hear me?
How are you doing?
Very well, very well.
Yeah, great to have you here, and it would be great to hear from you a little bit how you see the tech ecosystem across Europe evolve, and perhaps talk a little bit about how you see that fintech fits in there.
Well, on the whole, I think don't know exactly which indicator you want to use, but in terms of venture capital deployed, Europe is going is really increasing its footprint in the world in terms of startups. Obviously, fintech is an important, very important area with some really big fintechs like Adyen, in payments, and you have Klarna, TransferWise, and others. So and obviously London is a strong hub for fintechs, but also Amsterdam as well with Molly as well, another unicorn. So I think fintech has been one of the leading sectors together with SaaS, all kind of SaaS companies. Europe has a strength in deep tech, but it has a trouble getting, or the challenge getting that deep tech out into companies and growing those companies and scaling them and finding funding for it. So I think where there's a lot of potential and where you're seeing a lot of also interest going from politicians as well is in how we really grow the deep tech sector, biotech. Obviously now the future of computing is really big, and the chips manufacturing. So it's really the challenge. Really is how are we going to move the dynamics that we're seeing in fintech and in more the software related companies to the tough tech, or the tech that is harder to scale and more capital intensive. And I think on the whole the indicators are very positive in Europe. Obviously the rest of the world is also moving at a record pace, so the US and China particularly, so it's not just a matter of catching up, but it's even how do we get ahead of the game, and that's really going to be a big challenge.
Okay. And so what is missing then, Constantijn? If you talk about the scaling issue.
Well, missing, I think, is time. I think we are somewhat behind the developments in the US that have been basically from the 90s, where the bubble has taken down a number of companies. I think most of the internet sector in the Netherlands and in Europe actually got destroyed in the end of the 90s, in 2000, whereas the big tech companies in the US continued, and the venture capital industry with it grew considerably. So we are somewhat behind, and the question is how do we make up for that time? Because as the technologies are on a more exponential scale, so we're seeing this incredible rise of artificial intelligence and many other technologies now coming together, and so it's hard if you, for instance, with AI development, if you don't have the data capabilities yet, or we're running it against a skills shortage in Europe. Those kind of things are much harder to deal with than just basically redirecting flows of capital.
Yep.
And also curious, so you have a broad view on all the different sectors, and because that's techleap all about, it's stimulating the startup scene. And how do you actually compare the fintech ecosystem? So it's not only the startups or the scalers, but also the incumbents. How do you relate them to the other sectors? Are they outperformers or are they lagging behind? So what's your view?
I think media probably was the most disrupted industry, but fintech comes pretty close. Obviously, it's a much more regulated market, and therefore certain developments will be slower. On the other hand, regulation also provides opportunities. So no, I think fintech is really up at the forefront of this, and we're now seeing other sectors like health tech, prop tech, any tech, ag tech. Also starting to pick up pace, but fintech is definitely a leading sector, and the Netherlands has always been quite strong in financial services, and very enthusiastically adopted fintech in trading platforms, in payments, obviously very strong, and but also moving into other domains of fintech.
I think that's also one of the reasons why, let's say, you see that the Netherlands is becoming really like an integrated tech hub, right? Where you see a lot of disciplines coming together. So I wouldn't say that there's one field where we really excel and the rest is much limited. It's all on a relatively high level, which you see a lot of cross-pollination. And I think that's where a lot of benefits also come from, right?
Yes, but initially, obviously, depth is important too. So you need a critical mass of developers and some knowledge is really sector specific. So I think in a later stage or more mature ecosystem, you see that like software is eating the world, and the startup kind of approach and the way of funding goes into all different sectors. I mean, extreme notions especially in the US, where electric vehicles and even the space industry is now disrupted by startups. But at an initial phase, I think it's beneficial to be more concentrated around a limited set of topics, because then you'll have critical mass. You'll also be more attractive to foreign investors coming in, to foreign companies to join a cluster. And once you start building that out, then you start seeing adjacent industries kind of evolve as well. So the Netherlands is like one big city with a lot of parks and lakes in between. If we compare, we're about twice the size of Silicon Valley. But we have to start thinking in that kind of density and create more density, so that what's happening in Groningen is just as well part of that ecosystem as what's happening in the south, and that we are very well connected with what's happening in Flanders, what's happening in Berlin, in London, Paris, and Stockholm. Those kind of links are really important to take it forward.
Yeah. I think that's a really good one. And so what's also nice is that, of course, afterwards we have Jan Ceyssens from the DG FISMA European Commission on board. Is there any call out perhaps that you would want to do to him, or maybe an idea that you have, like, this is one of the challenges that Europe should really get solved also with their plans for financial services?
Well, I think if you just take a bit of a broader view of where Europe wants to go with tech, I think there is this tension between regulation and opportunity. So and we have to find the balance between protecting the consumers and creating opportunities. But now it seems that the legacy companies, legacy systems are determining what that balance should be, and how fast the transition can go. And I think that's wrong. I mean, I think the lobby in Europe is too strong on favoring the existing industries. And if we want to stay competitive, it might hurt more to the existing industry. But we have to focus more on enabling innovation. So it is really finding that balance. I think Europe has found a certain pride in regulating, like the GDPR and others, setting global norms, and that's okay. But you also have to have something to regulate in Europe. So we have to have European alternatives. Otherwise, we're regulating what's happening in China or in the US. But what we really want as well is to have our own champions, our own companies in health, in finance, in all those domains that are critical to our economy and our society.
Yeah, well, I think that's a great call out, Constantijn. I think that's definitely one we should be aiming for. And conscious also of your time, I think we should let you go, and then we can call to the stage Jan Ceyssens. But first of all, let me thank you, Constantijn, for joining us here. It's great how you support the full tech ecosystem and including the fintech ecosystem. So thank you for joining here as well and sharing your vision.
Good luck. Have a good event.
Thanks, Constantijn. Have a great day. Really nice to get the perspective of on how, let's say, we can look at scaling up across Europe, and that we need those European champions and need to figure out how also regulation actually facilitates that.
No, it's good. It's good to hear the view of Jan on the latest point.
Exactly, and as we have Jan Ceyssens, who's from the European Committee looking at the digital finance package, we of course could gladly have that discussion and figure out how indeed the interplay between regulations and facilitating innovation and economic growth, how they actually interplay. Good morning, Jan.
Good morning.
Great that you could join.
Yeah, very happy to speak to you today. Thanks very much. Yeah, no, I think those are important topics, and Constantijn actually addressed them already. Now, I think, first of all, I wanted to congratulate you. Actually, you have a great day, actually, European Day today in your FinTech Week. It shows really the kind of diversity of locations and of ecosystems which you have in the Netherlands, but also in Europe. And indeed, I think what that is, of course, something which you also see in other continents. I think what makes Europe special, indeed, that those are not just different locations, individual locations, but indeed they're part and parcel of a European single market. And indeed, you can scale up from one location to the other much more easily than this is possible actually in other continents around the world. And that's also really what we from the European Commission want to promote, because it's very clear in finance, and I think Constantijn mentioned that before, the regulatory part is much more important than maybe in other sectors. It's a highly regulated sector, and well, of course, for good reasons. But that also means regulatory fragmentation. So different rules in different countries actually is a much bigger obstacle to scaling up and developing new solutions than that will be in other sectors. And that's, I think, where Europe is a big opportunity, particularly for fintech, because indeed we have this internal market, this common market. We have what we call a single rule book on financial services. So we have the same rules actually applying in the Netherlands than in Germany, in France, in Italy, or elsewhere. And that makes it, of course, in principle, if this is really being lived until the end, that makes it much more easy actually for tech companies to also scale up and offer their products in other countries. And that's really also at the heart of the digital finance strategy, which we laid out last year, actually, where we said from the European Commission, well, what can we do actually to promote a strong but responsible digital finance sector in Europe? So we really want Europe to be pushing digital finance and also with strong European players in the lead. And so we've set out, based on kind of a broad outreach and consultation, I think we had some events also with you, actually, what we can do and what we will do, actually, to promote this between now and actually 3 years' time, 2024, when actually our regulatory cycle in Brussels comes to an end. And I just want to mention actually three big areas, basically, which we're looking at. And I think the first one is indeed this possibility, making full use of this possibility to register in one country and then scale up to other countries without additional burden. And that's a principle, as I mentioned, which we have in place in many areas already, but it still often doesn't work in practice. So I think one area where we don't have it, and we're just about now as part of our package actually to introduce is our crypto assets, where we do not have common rules. So in the future, we have set out what we call MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, which is really, I think, a first attempt across the globe really to provide for a whole continent a comprehensive framework for crypto asset markets, whether they're more in the more broader sense, or whether they're more in the area of stable coins. We really have a comprehensive framework, which I think, if you look now at the US, for example, they are now also reflecting. Gary Ginsel and others are considering, well, maybe we would need something similar as well. We have it on the table here in Europe. I think we're just about to agree it actually in Brussels, and so then that means that in a year's time, actually, fintechs could scale up in this new sector as well across Europe. And we are applying similar principles to other areas. Remote identification is a key one, where all stakeholders tell us, well, the rules are not the same. It's video ID in one country, it's photo ID in another one. So we already came with the European digital identity a couple of weeks ago, and we'll have indeed harmonized rules also on money laundering very, very shortly. So there again, you'll have the same principle, same rules across Europe, registering once, and then indeed you can benefit from them across the EU. So I think that's really the first key element, the scaling up with the passport, as we call it, registering in one country and then being able to work elsewhere. I think the second area we're really looking at is indeed what Constantijn also mentioned, this balance between risk and opportunity, which is an important one, because yes, on the one hand, indeed, without opportunity, without business, there's not even, let's say, a chance, or it's not even worth looking at risks or looking at regulation, because there's nothing to regulate. And I think in some areas, indeed, Europe needs to be careful that we do not lose the track. On the other hand, it's also very clear, and I think we've seen and we continue to see the situations. I mean, digital finance is still finance. It is risky, and if you have too many problems, if you have too many accidents, that also kind of harms a bit your overall reputation. And I think it harms the citizens' confidence. It harms the acceptance of new digital solutions. So we do really, both from the perspective of protecting our citizens, but also from the perspective of companies, we really need to have this balance. And I think from our side, we are trying to have it. We're trying to have an overall attractive framework, whether it is on digital operational resilience. We have put out these DORA proposals, whether it's on artificial intelligence, where we say, okay, there are very limited cases where there are indeed risks for fundamental rights. We need to look at them closer, but let's do it as part of the already existing regulation. And let's only do it in those areas where there's really a problem actually for fundamental rights and others. And just another example is the DLT pilot, which we're proposing, where we say, well, we can open you actually some space for experimentation as well in some areas, because maybe the DLT is changing the situation. So I think this balance between risks and opportunities is the second very important element, and I think we're trying to get that balance right. It's very clear. Both parts need to be there. One will not exist without the other. And the third one, but I'll be very, very short about that, is indeed data. And I think the objective aspiration actually to create a common European data space. It's very clear we need to scale up the data which is available as well, encourage data sharing and others. And that's again something where I think probably we have much better chances if we do that together in Europe. So those are really the three priorities we're working on: passporting, cross-border, balancing risks and opportunities, and indeed data, European data space. And well, I hope that from our side we're doing what we can actually to make Europe really an attractive place for fintech to grow.
Well, thanks, Jan, for the presentation. I just have one question related to what actually Prince Constantijn was mentioning. You probably know the saying, two dogs fight for a bone, and the third one runs away with it. So if you look at PSD2, so it's about breaking down the power of the banks in favor of the end consumer. So you create an environment where actually fintech startups have access to data in benefit of innovation and new services to all. But I'm wondering who's actually benefiting from it. Are they the big tech companies who are actually benefiting from this more than anyone else? So what's your view on that, if you have any?
Yeah, of course. This is it's a key topic. So I have strong views on this. Honestly, we think data is really the future of finance. So PSD2 is one way and one tool we had actually to really encourage all the players, and whether they're small or whether they're traditional or whether they're new, to realize this potential and think about it. And I think the second point is here, combination of data is what it's about. I mean, doesn't help anybody if everybody sits on their own data pool and they don't combine them actually. Actually, in that sense, if you're a big tech, maybe your own data pool is sufficient. But if you're a bank or if you're a fintech, probably your own data pool is not sufficient. So honestly, I do think that the whole kind of avenue of open finance and data sharing, which PSD2 started off, is really what we need, and has really led to a lot of reflection also in both in the established banks, but also in the fintechs on actually how data can be used more efficiently. And and how we can actually also benefit from this data sharing and create new opportunities. So honestly, I think this is the way forward. And whether now you can discuss whether the implementation is always perfect, and that's something we'll of course review as always, and you can maybe at some point learn some lessons. But the principle that basically that data sharing is important, applies more for the smaller companies, applies more for traditional players than it would apply for big techs who already are sitting on a large data pool. And what I do want to say is that on our side, I mean, we really care about the level playing field. And you know, the Digital Markets Act is a proposal we did recently, which looks not just at the financial sector, but actually at the economy at large, at the large gatekeeper platforms. And we are asking them, actually, we are requiring them to share data as well. So we are looking, we apply this principle to everybody. And in a way, the bigger you are, the more data you have, the more market power you have as well, the stronger your obligations will be.
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting one as a breakup of the market. You had another question, Harry?
No, I think that's the moving in the right direction. So it's not only an obligation for the banks itself, but also for other parties who has a huge amount of data.
Yeah,
so to
exactly. And I think from a consumer perspective, you would want just to be able to control the data. But I think that's also one of the challenges that I want to touch upon there briefly, Jan, is that I think in any case, I see it's good that you take the data part also as part of your domain, while you could also argue that it's more in the digital space rather than in the financial space. But I think that's something that needs to be solved together, right? How we deal with data. And I think we're really there on a really important tipping point, I think, because with GDPR took a big step towards our thinking about data, but I do think we're still thinking about it to a large extent rather than doing it, because let's say the actual how you give control to people on their own data is still very fuzzy and implemented differently across member states and different industries. How do you see that evolve? Because I think we're actually now at the point where we're going to also make some important choices about what we are allowed to do with data and in how far data actually should travel.
Yeah, and I think again this is a topic where yes, it's about regulation, but it's also about consumer confidence actually, and in a way regulation is, in that sense, I would not say here the enemy of business, but it is actually the two need to go hand in hand. Because if consumers are not confident that actually their data are well protected, then they will not, unless they are forced to, unless they are in a pandemic situation and they have no other choice, but they will not move the full way towards this digital area. And I think on data sharing, that's also very clear. I mean, many people have quite question marks. What do they really want to permit the reuse of their data? The more I think they have really the impression and the clarity, the confidence that they are in control, they have the sovereignty over the data and they can decide, I think the more they're willing to do it, the more for good reasons, if it serves them, of course. The more they have the impression they are just kind of being treated as an object and people are just doing with their data whatever they want, well, I think that confidence will not be there. So on our side, I think we think the GDPR principles are good ones. They need to be implemented, and that's sometimes difficult, and we are on a journey there. But I think the direction of travel is certainly the right one, and we need to now work indeed, and that's also, let's say, part of the challenge indeed on open payments, open banking, open finance. Indeed, how make this operational in practice actually.
Yeah, because I think in any case the financial industry, I think is very highly on a magnifier glass. If you talk about what happens with the data, it's understandable, right? Because people see this as sensitive data. But from that perspective, I think that's where also some innovators, run into the wall. Maybe first when they are looking at what are we allowed to do and how smart can our algorithms get basically. And so I think I see a lot of social and ethical debates going on as well within the industry about how should we deal with this? How can we indeed balance opportunity for the customer as well as opportunity for the supplier of these services, and how do we create a proper framework for that? And so I see that we have probably still some interaction to do also with the regulators to come up with a proper sort of innovation on the framework.
I'm afraid so, yes. If you do fintech, you will have to deal with the regulator somehow. I think that's clear. But okay, I mean, again, I think it's also in your interest because there are a few areas where things can go so wrong than in finance. And if people see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 kind of fintechs getting into problems, I mean, that will have an impact on the trust in the sector. So honestly, I think you have an interest in this regulation as well.
No, for sure. And I think, but that's also, I think everyone is calling for regulations rather than saying that they shouldn't be there. But it is a bit of fine tuning still to be done, right?
Yeah, they're very clear. And that's, I think, the whole purpose also of our work, to make sure that we can achieve these objectives in the least kind of impact, least intrusive way, that we don't create so much administrative burden. And that indeed, just to come back to that, okay, you need to comply once, but then once you comply, you can market in 27 member states, and you do not have to do the same exercise again and again.
No, exactly. So I definitely also I would like to thank you, Jan, for your sharing your insights. One thing I definitely would like to emphasize as well is that I think that people should be aware of that you do a lot of call outs to the market for insights and input on the legislation that's being drafted. So I definitely want to make the audience aware of that, to keep an eye out for the Commission's calls for input, because I think I see that you're really getting the hang of working together with market participants to support drafting new legislation, which I think is really favorable to keep that interaction going. And I think it's great that you do that, and then from that perspective also great that you're here to explain your views and the key points that you're working on at this moment, Jan.
Yeah, thanks very much, and have a great day.
Thank you, Jan. Looking forward to see you again soon, and enjoy your day as well. Let us then look at what's coming up. We're running a little bit out of time, so here you see the agenda for the coming day. I'm not going to go through, but if you're on the Hopin platform, you'll be able to see this agenda in the reception area, and when you go to the sessions, you'll see there which ones are live. And actually, the next one, which is coming up, is a panel discussion with 3 investors: Katik Pharma from Techstars, Rodbad Vlaar from Finch Capital, and Pauline Brunel from Blackfin. And we're going to discuss the developments of fintech across Europe from a VC perspective. And so looking forward to that. So if you wait just a minute, you'll be able to go to that session on the Hopin platform. And should you not be on the Hopin platform yet, you could go to xfw.amsterdam to join. Thank you very much, Harry, for sharing your insights this morning and joining me here.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Looking forward today. There is actually a special item today from a regulator's perspective. AFM and DNB will share their view on the market, and that actually relates very well to what Jan just said.
It's a very good point indeed. Together with the Ministry of Finance, they're doing a session with Q&A in the afternoon, and I would indeed recommend people to join that if they have an interest in the regulatory area. It will be good to learn about the Dutch digital finance package or the FinTech Action Plan, and indeed interact with the regulators. So thanks for that call out, Harry. I hope everyone is going to enjoy their day. Thank you very much for participating this morning. Looking forward to see you again either tomorrow morning, but of course, rather see you during the rest of the day, during all the interesting sessions and the tour across Europe. Have a great day, everyone.
Have fun.